One phone call. That's all it took to destroy my life. 9 years ago, my own mother's voice trembled with rage as she accused me of something so vile, so soul-crushingly false, that I could barely breathe. My family didn't ask questions. They erased me. No trial, no defense, just silence. But now, they want me back. They say they're sorry. They say it was all a lie. But after all these years, do I even care? It was a warm evening in Ohio, the kind where the air feels thick with the scent of cut grass and barbecue smoke drifting from neighborhood backyards. I was 23, finishing my final year of trade school, studying automotive repair. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. My days were filled with work, late night gaming with friends, and the quiet satisfaction of moving towards something stable. That night, I had just sat down, controller in hand, headset on, ready for an evening of mindless escape. My phone vibrated once. I glanced at the screen. Mom. I ignored it. She never called me this late. Maybe she meant to text. Then it buzzed again. Immediately. That wasn't normal. My mother wasn't the overbearing type, but there was an unspoken rule in my family. If someone calls twice in a row, you answer. That only happened for emergencies. A car accident, a hospital visit, a death. I excused myself from the game, slipped off my headset, and answered, "Hello?" At first, all I heard was chaos. Voices talking over one another, my mother's frantic breathing, the sound of my father saying something sharp in the background. Then, her voice broke through, shaking, frantic. "Ethan, is there something you need to tell me?" I frowned. "What? Tell you what?" She sucked in a sharp breath, like she was preparing herself to say something unbearable. "Don't lie to me. Ava told us everything." My heart stopped. Ava? My 15-year-old cousin? I hadn't seen her in years. What was she talking about? "Mom, I have no idea what you mean," I said, sitting up, gripping the phone tighter. Her voice cracked, hysteria rising. "She told us what you did to her when she was 10. She told your brothers. She told your aunt and uncle. And now she's told me. And I swear to God, Ethan, if you don't start telling me the truth." My head was spinning. What the hell was she talking about? "Mom, stop, what is she saying I did?" A horrible pause. Then, in a voice so full of disgust it didn't even sound like hers, she spat out the words. "She says you touched her, Ethan. She says you hurt her when she was little. She told us everything." It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. Touched her? Hurt her? I felt like I was in a dream, a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My stomach twisted. My hands went ice cold. "That's not true?" I whispered. "That's not true. I would never." She gave us details, Ethan. "Where, how, when. We know you did it." The words hit me like a hammer to the chest. I wanted to scream, to shake her through the phone and tell her to snap out of it. I didn't do anything. Silence. And then my father's voice, hard as steel. "You are no longer our son." My breath caught in my throat. "Dad, please, don't call us again." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, disoriented, trembling, as if I had just been in a car crash and walked away without realizing I was bleeding out. I tried to call back. No answer. I texted my brothers, begging them to tell me what was happening, to at least hear me out. They didn't respond. Instead, one by one, they blocked me. I don't remember much of the next few hours. I don't remember standing up. Don't remember walking into the bathroom. Don't even remember turning the shower on. But at some point, I found myself standing under scalding water, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. I scrubbed at my skin like I could wash the sickening feeling off, like I could erase what had just happened. I kept telling myself, this isn't real. This is some kind of horrible misunderstanding. It'll be fixed tomorrow. But tomorrow came, and nothing changed. By the time the sun rose, I had been erased. My father's last words echoed in my head, over and over, like a curse I couldn't break. "You are no longer our son." In the days that followed, I did everything I could to fix it. I called my parents, no answer. I messaged my brothers, blocked. I even reached out to Ava herself, desperate to understand why she was saying these things. Why she was destroying my life? Nothing. The silence was worse than the words. The silence meant I was already guilty in their eyes. No trial, no hearing, no chance to even defend myself. The silence meant they had decided I wasn't worth listening to. I spent weeks in a haze, moving through life like a ghost. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the way my mother's voice cracked, the way my father's voice dripped with finality. I kept expecting a knock on my door, expecting the cops to show up, expecting the rest of my life to be completely ripped away from me. That never happened. Ava never took it that far. But she didn't have to. She had already taken everything that mattered. I didn't go to work. I didn't show up to class. I drowned myself in whiskey and silence, waiting for something, anything, to snap me out of it. But nothing came, because this wasn't a nightmare I could wake up from. This was my new reality. I used to believe that when people said, family is forever, they meant it. That no matter what happened, no matter how bad things got, your family would always be there. But when my own mother and father, people who had raised me, people whose voices had once meant home, cut me off like I was nothing, I learned the truth. Family is only forever when they want it to be. The first few weeks after my parents disowned me were a blur of silence and alcohol. I barely left my apartment. I didn't go to work. I ignored calls from friends. Not that there were many to begin with. I spent most of my time lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering how the hell my life had crumbled overnight. At first, I kept thinking they'd come around. That one day, my phone would ring and it would be my mom, crying, saying she was sorry, that they had made a mistake. But the call never came. The days dragged into weeks, then months, and the weight of it all became unbearable. The pain wasn't just emotional, it was physical. A constant knot in my stomach, a sharp, gnawing ache in my chest that wouldn't go away. I was grieving, but it was worse than death. Because when someone dies, you don't have to wonder if they'll come back. You don't have to sit in the dark, staring at your phone, hoping for a message that never arrives. They had killed me, in their own way. But I was still here, walking around in the corpse of my old life, pretending I wasn't already gone. I tried to move forward. I really did. When my savings started running low, I forced myself to crawl out of my apartment long enough to get a job at a local auto shop. The pay wasn't great, but it was something. I spent my days elbow deep in engine grease, working until my muscles ached, just to keep my mind off everything. But no matter how busy I kept myself, the loneliness never left. I had never been the most social guy to begin with, but after being completely cut off from my family, I found it almost impossible to talk to people. What was I supposed to say when someone asked about them? Oh, my parents think I'm a monster. My brothers won't speak to me. My entire family erased me overnight because of something I never did. Yeah, not exactly first date conversation material. So I stopped trying, stopped going out, stopped making small talk, stopped letting people in. For a while, the only thing that gave me any kind of escape was drinking. Whiskey, mostly. Cheap, burning, numbing. It took the edge off the rage and the grief. It helped me sleep. It made the silence feel less empty. And when that wasn't enough, I found other ways to quiet my mind. Oxy, a few pills here and there, just to take the weight off my chest, just to make the nights a little less unbearable. I told myself it wasn't a problem, that I could stop whenever I wanted. But deep down, I knew better. Because when you get to a point where you don't care if you wake up the next day, everything becomes a crutch. I spent that first year waiting for the cops to show up. Every time I heard a knock on my door, my stomach would twist into knots. I had nightmares about being dragged away in handcuffs, locked in a cell for something I didn't do. But that day never came. Ava never pressed charges, never took it beyond our family. And that should have been a relief, right? It wasn't. Because what was worse than going to prison was knowing that, in the eyes of my own family, I already belonged there. They never gave me a chance to defend myself. They never questioned whether her story made sense. They just believed her because she was a young girl and I was the older cousin, and that was enough. That was enough to destroy my life. The worst part wasn't even the accusations themselves. It was what came after. It was holidays spent alone in my tiny, run-down apartment while I imagined my family sitting around a table without me. It was walking past strangers on the street and wondering if they had families who loved them, families who wouldn't throw them away over a single lie. It was losing pieces of myself that I knew I'd never get back. I used to be someone who laughed, someone who trusted people. Now, I was just trying to survive. But survival, I found, is a funny thing. After a while, you stop waiting for the world to throw you a lifeline. You build your own. I worked hard, harder than I ever had before. I buried myself in fixing cars, in late-night shifts, in learning everything I could about the trade. And slowly, painfully, stubbornly, bit by bit, I built a life, a real one. By the time I hit 26, I had saved up enough money to get out of my old neighborhood. I traded my dingy apartment for a small house with a garage, nothing fancy, but mine. I bought a motorcycle, something I had always wanted as a kid but never had the money for. I cut down on the drinking, threw out the pills. I still didn't have friends. I still didn't trust people, but for the first time in years, I could breathe again. And that was enough, or at least I thought it was. Until one ordinary afternoon, my phone buzzed with a notification that made my stomach drop. A message from my mother, the first one in 9 years. My hands trembled as I stared at it, the words blurring together before I could even bring myself to read them. When I finally did, my blood turned to ice. Ethan, it's been so long. We miss you. We need to talk. My pulse pounded in my ears. My vision blurred. My mother, the same woman who screamed at me through the phone, the same woman who let me rot in silence for nearly a decade. And now, just like that, she was back? I told myself not to respond, told myself to delete the message and move on. But then, before I could even process the first text, a second one came through. Ava told the truth. She admitted she made it all up. We're so sorry, Ethan. Please, please talk to us. The world spun beneath me. I had waited 9 years for this moment. I had dreamed of it, imagined it 1,000 different ways, and now that it was here, all I could feel was rage. I should have felt relief. After nearly a decade of silence, my family was finally admitting they were wrong. Ava had confessed. It was all a lie. I should have felt some sense of vindication, justice, even peace. But all I felt was rage. A slow, burning, suffocating rage that curled around my ribs and made it hard to breathe. 9 years. 9 years of living like a ghost, of waking up every morning with a weight on my chest so heavy that I sometimes wondered if it would just be easier to stop waking up at all. 9 years of struggling to build a life, of learning how to exist without the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. And now, they wanted to talk? Like they hadn't already buried me alive? I didn't answer my mother's text that day, or the next. I let her words sit there, unread, like a message scrawled on a gravestone. Because that's what I was to them for the last 9 years. A name on a stone, a memory they had erased. And now, they wanted to resurrect me like nothing had happened? I wasn't sure I wanted to be found. I knew I couldn't ignore them forever. Because the truth was, despite everything, a part of me had waited for this moment. I had imagined it 1,000 different ways. In my darkest moments, I had pictured my parents begging for my forgiveness, crying, telling me how sorry they were. I had pictured them on their knees, apologizing for not believing me, for throwing me away like garbage. But now that the moment had arrived, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt cheap, like an afterthought, like they were only reaching out because they had no choice now, because the truth had come out and they couldn't ignore it anymore. I spent days, weeks circling my phone, staring at the messages, trying to figure out what to do. And the worst part? The anger wasn't the only thing I felt. Buried beneath it so deep I almost didn't want to admit it was there, was something else, something fragile, something that looked an awful lot like hope. I finally broke after 2 weeks. I sent my mother a single text back. One word, call. It took her less than a minute to respond. My phone barely rang once before I picked up. Ethan, Her voice was exactly the same, but it wasn't. I remembered how that voice used to sound when she called me in for dinner, or when she laughed at my stupid childhood jokes. But now, it sounded thin, frantic, like she was grasping at something just out of reach. Like she knew I might slip away forever. "I'm so sorry," she said immediately, before I could even open my mouth. "I don't even know where to start. Start with why." My voice was flat, cold, unfamiliar, even to me. "Why didn't you believe me?" Silence. For a moment, I thought maybe she had hung up. Maybe she couldn't face the question. Then, finally, a breath. We thought we were protecting her. Her voice cracked, and I knew she was crying. Good. Let her cry. Let her feel even an ounce of what I had felt all those years. "She was just a little girl," my mother continued, "and she told us these awful things, Ethan. She was so detailed, so sure. We wanted to do the right thing. We thought," she stopped, "because there was no excuse. They didn't just protect her. They condemned me. And for what? A lie. A child's lie that turned into my living nightmare. Why now?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "Why are you reaching out now?" She hesitated. I heard my father in the background, saying something I couldn't quite make out. Then she said the words that made my stomach drop. Because Ava admitted it wasn't true. My breath caught in my throat. I had already read it in her text, but hearing it out loud was different. It made it real. "What do you mean, admitted it?" I forced myself to say. Another pause. Then she told me everything. Apparently, my name had come up at a recent family gathering. One of my cousins had casually asked if anyone had heard from me. And that's when Ava, the girl who had destroyed my life, laughed. Laughed. Like it was some silly misunderstanding. Like it wasn't the reason I had spent 9 years alone, drowning in grief and anger. And then, just like that, she admitted she had made it up. She didn't mean for it to go so far, she had said. She thought maybe it was a dream or a false memory. She had been young, confused, and everyone had believed her, without hesitation, without question. They had thrown me away without a second thought. And now they expected me to just come back? Like nothing had happened? The phone call lasted almost 4 hours. By the end of it, I was exhausted, my throat raw from talking, from arguing, from finally forcing them to hear me. My mother cried. My father didn't say much, probably too ashamed. But for the first time, I heard regret in his voice. They didn't beg, exactly, but they made it clear they wanted me back. They wanted to fix things. They wanted me to meet my nieces and nephews' kids I hadn't even known existed. They wanted to see me for Christmas. They wanted to start over. I told them I'd think about it, and I meant it. Because despite everything, despite the anger, the years of pain, the scars that would never fully heal, I wasn't sure I could let them go. Not completely, not forever. Because the truth was, no matter how much I hated them for what they had done, I still wanted my family back. I had spent nearly a decade in silence, learning how to live without them. I had forced myself to accept that my family was gone, that the people who raised me had buried me in the grave of a lie and never looked back. And yet, here I was, standing at a crossroad I never expected. After that first phone call, my mother kept texting. My father too short, cautious messages, as if they were afraid I would disappear again. My brothers, who had once cut me out without hesitation, had started reaching out as well. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel, because the anger was still there, deep and sharp, like broken glass lodged under my skin. But beneath it was something else, something dangerous, something that looked a hell of a lot like hope. I didn't respond right away. Even after hours of pacing my house, replaying the conversation with my parents over and over in my head, I still didn't know what to say. Because how was I supposed to answer the people who abandoned me? How was I supposed to speak to them without screaming? Without letting every ounce of my bitterness and fury explode through the phone? I spent the next few weeks avoiding their calls. Not out of spite, but because I genuinely didn't know if I could handle it. Every time I saw my mother's name flash across the screen, I felt like I was being yanked backward, dragged into the past I had spent so many years trying to escape. But I also couldn't bring myself to block her. Because, deep down, I knew. I knew that if I didn't face them now, I never would. When I finally answered my mother's call again, her relief was instant. "Ethan," she breathed, as if she had been holding it in for weeks. I didn't respond right away. I let her sit in it, let her feel even a fraction of the weight I had carried for years. "You have no idea how sorry we are," she continued, voice trembling. "I know you probably hate us." I didn't let her finish. Hate doesn't even begin to cover it. Silence. And then, in the smallest, most fragile voice I had ever heard from her, "I know." She told me that they had spoken to Ava again, that after she casually admitted she had made it up, my family had really confronted her. At first, Ava tried to play it off like it was some kind of misunderstanding. She had been young, confused. She had truly believed something had happened back then, and by the time she told the story, she had convinced herself it was real. It wasn't until she saw the reactions in the room, the shock, the horror, the realization that she had destroyed someone's life for nothing, that she realized just how deep the damage went. And when my mother asked her, point blank, "Did Ethan do anything to you?" she had shaken her head. "No, I hadn't. I never had." I sat on my couch, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles went white, trying to process it all. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, break it into 1,000 pieces, because none of this changed what had already happened. My life had already been ruined, my reputation shattered, my relationship with my family ripped apart beyond recognition. All because a child had spoken a lie and the people I trusted most had believed her without question. And now that the truth was out, they expected it all to be undone. Like 9 years hadn't passed. Like I hadn't spent nearly a decade in exile, drowning in pain they never even bothered to check on. "Ethan," my mother whispered, "please, we want to fix this." I let out a bitter laugh. "And how do you plan on doing that, Mom?" Silence. She didn't have an answer, because there wasn't one. There was no fixing this, no rewinding time, no undoing the nights I had spent staring at my ceiling, wondering if I even had a reason to keep going. She couldn't give me back the years I lost. She couldn't give me back who I was before. And yet, as much as I wanted to tell her to go to hell, to block her number and erase her the way she had erased me, I didn't. Because even after everything, even after all the pain, all the betrayal, all the suffering they had put me through, a small, broken part of me still wanted my family back. The messages from my brothers started coming in more frequently. At first, it was just small things. A simple, "Hey, how are you?" from Caleb. A mom told me she spoke to you. "I know we screwed up. I'm sorry," from Ryan. I ignored them at first. Then, finally, I answered, "I don't know if I can ever forgive you." Ryan responded almost instantly. "I don't expect you to. I just want to talk." And just like that, the floodgates opened. A week later, we were on the phone really talking for the first time in nearly a decade. It wasn't easy. Hearing his voice brought back memories of all the times he had laughed at me as a kid, teased me in that way. Older brothers always do. Memories that had been locked away beneath years of anger and pain. He didn't try to justify what they did. He didn't try to tell me it wasn't their fault. He just listened. And for the first time in years, I let myself talk. About the nights I spent drinking myself into oblivion. About the dark thoughts that had nearly consumed me. About the way I had completely stopped believing in people because of what they had done. By the time I finished, he was crying. I wasn't sure if it was enough. I wasn't sure if anything ever would be. But for the first time since this all started, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. My mother begged me to visit. I told her not yet, because even though I had answered their calls, even though I had started speaking to my brothers again, I wasn't sure if I could stand in front of them without breaking apart. I wasn't ready to see their faces, to sit across from them at the same table where they once decided I was dead to them. I wasn't sure if I would ever be ready, but I knew one thing for certain. For the first time in nearly a decade, I wasn't drowning anymore. I spent 9 years convincing myself that I didn't need them, that my family was nothing more than ghosts from a life I had left behind. and for a long time I believed it. But then the truth came out, and suddenly the people who erased me wanted me back. My mother called almost every day now. My father, a man who had once told me I was no longer his son, had sent a few messages, short and uncertain, as if he didn't know how to reach out after all these years. And my brothers, the same ones who called me disgusting, who blocked me without a second thought, were trying to rebuild a bridge that had burned to ashes nearly a decade ago. I had spent so much time hating them, so many nights replaying their betrayal in my head, imagining all the things I would say if they ever came crawling back. And yet, now that it was actually happening, I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. I just felt tired. A month passed before I finally agreed to see them. I didn't go to a big family gathering. I wasn't ready for that yet. Instead, I met my parents alone at a small diner outside of town, a neutral place where I could leave if things went south. A place where they couldn't pretend we were just some normal family getting back together like nothing had happened. When I walked in, they were already there, sitting at a booth in the back, looking older, more fragile than I remembered. For a split second, I hesitated. Not because I was nervous, but because for the first time, I realized how much they had aged. My mother's face was thinner, more lined than before. My father, who had always carried himself with a quiet, unshakable authority, looked smaller somehow, like the weight of what they had done had finally settled onto his shoulders. For 9 years, I had imagined this moment. I had told myself that if I ever saw them again, I would make them suffer the way I had suffered, that I would throw their apologies back in their faces, walk away, and never look back. But as I approached the booth, I felt none of that. I just felt empty. I slid into the seat across from them, my arms crossed, my face unreadable. They looked at me like they weren't sure if I was real. "Ethan?" my mother whispered, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. "I can't tell you how sorry we are." I said nothing. I let her speak. I let her tell me how much she regretted everything. How she and my father had spent years hating themselves for what they did, but had been too ashamed, too afraid to reach out. I let her cry. Let my father lower his head in silent guilt. Let them finally sit in the pain they had caused. And when she was done, when there was nothing left for her to say, I leaned forward, my voice calm but sharp. "I lost everything because of you." She nodded, her hands trembling. "I know. No, Mom. You don't. You think you do, but you don't." I looked at my father then, at the man who had cut me out like I was nothing. "You killed me," I said quietly. "I spent 9 years clawing my way out of a grave that you dug for me. And the worst part? You never even questioned it. Not once." I could see the guilt in their faces, the way their shoulders hunched under the weight of my words. And I didn't stop. "Do you know what it's like to wake up every morning and feel like your existence is a mistake?" I asked. "Do you know what it's like to spend every holiday alone, to wonder if you even deserve to be alive? Do you know how close I came to making sure I wasn't?" My mother let out a small, broken sob. My father's face paled. I didn't care. They needed to hear it. They needed to understand what they had done. We sat there in silence for a long time after that. And then, my father spoke. His voice was hoarse, raw, like it physically hurt to speak. "We don't expect you to forgive us, Ethan. We just want a chance to try." I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, I didn't know if I could ever forgive them. I didn't know if I could ever look at them and not feel the weight of every year they had abandoned me. But I also knew that I was tired of being angry, tired of carrying this weight, tired of letting them live in my head, rent-free, while I stayed trapped in a past that I could never change. So, after what felt like an eternity, I let out a slow breath and said, "I don't know if things will ever be okay between us, but I'll try." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a promise. But it was something. In the months that followed, I slowly began to let them in. I visited my brothers, met their wives, their kids, nieces, and nephews that I hadn't even known existed. I took it one step at a time, setting boundaries, making sure they understood that just because I was willing to talk didn't mean everything was suddenly fine. because it wasn't. Some wounds don't heal completely. Some scars never fade. But for the first time in a long, long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to carry this burden alone anymore. I wasn't sure if I would ever fully forgive them. I wasn't sure if I would ever be able to look at my parents without remembering the years they let me rot in silence. But I knew one thing for certain. I had survived. I had rebuilt my life from nothing. And now, I was going to live it. On my terms, not theirs. Life has a way of teaching us lessons in the most painful ways. And sometimes, those lessons come from the people we trust the most. Betrayal cuts deep, but survival is possible. This story is not just about loss, it's about resilience. It reminds us that family is not defined by blood alone, but by the love and loyalty they show when it matters most. When trust is broken, it may never fully heal, but that doesn't mean we have to let anger and bitterness define the rest of our lives. Forgiveness is not about excusing what was done. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of the past. Carrying hatred for too long only harms the one holding it. As we grow older, we realize that time is not infinite. We must choose carefully where we invest our energy. Sometimes, letting go of resentment does not mean welcoming people back with open arms, but simply choosing peace for ourselves. Life is too short to let others' mistakes steal our joy. The past cannot be changed, but we can decide how we move forward with strength, with wisdom, and most importantly, on our own terms.